The moment my sister-in-law crossed the line, and landed herself in jail. My name is Emma, and I'm 29 years old. I've been married to Harry for 7 wonderful years. Our marriage is built on trust, respect, and love. But there's one thing that's always cast a shadow over our happiness: Harry's sister, Kayla. When I first met her, I liked her. She was outgoing, bubbly, and seemed like the perfect sister-in-law. But over time, I began to see a different side to her. Kayla is toxic, manipulative, and negative. She's always been the center of attention in our family, but not in a good way. She demands that everything revolve around her, and if it doesn't, she makes sure to create chaos. I've tried, over and over again, to be the bigger person, to stay on her good side. I worked hard to avoid conflict with her, because Harry loved her, and I didn't want to make things harder for him. But despite my efforts, Kayla would constantly undermine me. She would bring up Harry's ex-girlfriends in front of me, reminding him of their pasts, even suggesting that he should get in touch with them again. It was obvious she still had some strange attachment to Harry, and every time she would speak like that, I felt humiliated. Harry noticed, of course. He would ask her to stop, but she never listened. She also played the victim card a lot. When Harry and I decided to live together, she tried to convince him to break up with me, saying I wasn't good enough for him. And every time I stood up for myself or made a decision she didn't like, she would mock me. She would call me jealous or say I was overreacting. It wasn't just hurtful, it was exhausting. The more time passed, the more I started to feel the weight of her negativity. She would show up to our family events, always wearing a mask of fake sweetness, but deep down, I could tell she resented me. Still, I did my best to be civil. I didn't want to cause drama, but Kayla had a way of making everything about herself, and it was becoming harder and harder to ignore. This wasn't just about petty jealousy anymore. It was about her trying to tear down everything Harry and I had worked for, and I was getting tired of it. Things started to spiral out of control the day Harry and I got engaged. It should have been one of the happiest moments of our lives, but instead, it was tainted by Kayla's actions. The whole family was celebrating, but Kayla, who had always treated me like I was invisible, became unusually quiet. At first, I thought she was just taking a moment to process the news. But no. Moments later, she startled everyone by abruptly standing up and storming out of the room, leaving everyone in shock. I was confused, but Harry wasn't. He knew something was off, so he followed her. Soon, we learned that Kayla was crying to him, angry because she felt she should have been the first person to know about our engagement. It didn't make sense to me. I had tried so hard to be patient with her, to let her have her space in Harry's life, but now it was clear she was crossing a line. The next thing I knew, I was receiving a message from Kayla, a message that, quite frankly, chilled me to the core. She was demanding that I treat her brother better because, according to her, she had always been the most important woman in Harry's life. She was implying that our bond, our marriage, somehow wasn't enough. I was livid, but at that point, I didn't even want to give her the satisfaction of a response. So, I left her message on read. That seemed to infuriate her even more. She continued to ignore me at every turn. She was involved in all the wedding plans, showing up uninvited to things like my bridal shower and dress shopping. Her behavior was becoming more than just irritating, it was manipulative. Every time she spoke, it felt like a jab at my decisions, my choices, my life with Harry. Finally, I snapped. I couldn't take it anymore. I told her, flat out, that she was no longer invited to our wedding. I couldn't handle her constant negativity and attempts to undermine me. And when I made it clear she wasn't welcome, she was furious. She called Harry, crying and yelling, demanding that he control me. That was the final straw. Harry stood by me, supporting my decision. He told Kayla, in no uncertain terms, that if she couldn't respect us, then she would be out of our lives. She reluctantly apologized, but it was clear she didn't mean it. I was done, and I had no intention of letting her ruin our wedding. After the wedding, I thought things might finally calm down. Harry and I had celebrated our big day, surrounded by friends and family, but that peace was short-lived. Kayla's behavior was escalating, and now she had a new tactic, getting involved in our lives in ways that were impossible to ignore. It was as if the wedding hadn't even happened, and she was still trying to assert herself as the most important woman in Harry's life. We tried to give her some space, thinking she'd back off now that we were married. But instead, she started showing up unannounced, claiming she needed help with personal issues. It was the same old manipulation, the same attempt to insert herself into our lives. I started to feel like we couldn't escape her. Her problems were always a bigger deal than anything going on in our own lives, and Harry, though he was trying to be supportive, didn't see just how much of a toll this was taking on me. Then, Kayla got even more involved when I found out I was pregnant. I thought we could finally have a peaceful time, enjoying this new chapter in our lives, but she couldn't stand it. She made sure to make a big scene when we told the family, acting as though the attention wasn't on her for the first time. It was clear she was struggling with something deep inside, but it was her behavior that really started to push me over the edge. She started making comments, trying to undermine my pregnancy. It wasn't just jealousy anymore, it was a full-blown attack on everything I had. I couldn't even enjoy the moment without her taunting me about the baby. She even brought up how she had lost a child, trying to guilt-trip me, saying she understood the pain of motherhood. But it was clear she wasn't speaking from a place of empathy. Instead, she was trying to make me feel guilty for moving on with my life. And that's when it all boiled over. I had had enough. Kayla's attempts to invade our space, her constant attempts to make me feel less than, were unbearable. When she crossed that line, especially during a time when I needed peace, I realized there was no going back. She wasn't just hurting me anymore, she was hurting my family, and I couldn't allow it. Things took an even darker turn when Kayla's jealousy reached a new level. It was like a storm brewing in the background, just waiting to strike when I least expected it. It had started to feel like there was no escaping her toxicity. The constant comments, the subtle digs, they were taking a toll on me. I had hoped time and distance might help her see reason, but it only fueled her resentment further. Then came the birthday party, Harry's birthday. I thought it would be a simple, happy celebration, but the tension in the air was palpable as soon as Kayla showed up. We'd managed to move forward after all the wedding drama, but I could feel the old animosity stirring again. She walked in, trying to act like everything was fine, but it was clear she wasn't over anything. She was still bitter, still fighting for the attention she felt she deserved. And as soon as we made our big announcement, revealing that we were expecting our first child, I saw her face twist in a way I couldn't ignore. She wasn't happy for us, she was fuming. She barely acknowledged our news, and her mood shifted instantly. It was as if she couldn't bear the thought of someone else taking the spotlight. She stood there, quietly seething, making a show of her discontent without saying a word. But I knew. We all knew. The resentment was still alive and well. When it was time for the meal, Kayla did something that chilled me to the bone. She went out of her way to make sure I had a dish that was supposedly for me, but something felt off. I didn't think much of it at first. But then, I noticed the shrimp. My allergy to shrimp had always been known. I hadn't asked for shrimp, but there it was, right in front of me. I hesitated for a moment, but then decided to eat it, not thinking it was anything sinister. Little did I know, it was all part of her twisted plan. Kayla had poisoned my meal, or at least tried to. I watched in horror as my husband's best friend, Jamie, who had unknowingly grabbed my plate, suddenly started choking. His face turned pale, and his body went limp. Panic spread across the room as Jamie collapsed, and I realized, with a sickening feeling in my gut, what had just happened. As Jamie lay unconscious, the room was filled with chaos. Kayla's expression went from faint concern to pure shock, her eyes darting from the plate to me, as if she hadn't expected the plan to go so wrong. I could barely breathe, watching as people rushed to Jamie's side, calling for help. The weight of what had just happened slammed into me. What if this wasn't just a mistake? What if Kayla had truly tried to hurt me and my baby? The thought made my stomach churn. The paramedics arrived, and within moments, Jamie was whisked away to the hospital. Kayla stayed glued to his side, but her panic wasn't enough to hide the anger in her eyes. It was like she was seething, watching the damage unfold. I had no idea how to react. My world was spinning, my body frozen, as if I were still in a nightmare. This wasn't just a family fight anymore, this was something far darker. My husband, Harry, could barely look at his sister. The rage building inside him was palpable. I'd never seen him so furious, so out of control. He knew Kayla well, but this crossed every line. The thought of her jeopardizing our unborn child, of poisoning Jamie by mistake, was too much to take in. When we got the news that Jamie had recovered, I felt a glimmer of relief, but that didn't erase the danger she had put us in. Then the police arrived. With all the commotion, it didn't take long for suspicions to rise. As they interviewed everyone, I felt the weight of Kayla's actions slowly sinking in. The evidence was there. It wasn't just a bad coincidence. She had poisoned my meal, likely hoping to harm me. But it wasn't just me, she could have hurt Jamie too, and that was something I couldn't ignore. When the officers confirmed that the dish she had handed me had been tampered with, I knew there was no turning back. Kayla's fate was sealed. As the investigation continued, I watched her crumble. She was arrested and charged with multiple offenses, including food tampering and endangering lives. The shock on her face when she was taken away was something I'll never forget. She was finally going to face the consequences of her actions, and all I could do was feel a sick, twisted sense of vindication. We'd love to hear your thoughts on this intense story. Do you think Kayla's actions were unforgivable, or can people change? How would you have handled this situation? Drop your comments below, and let's discuss. Don't forget to like, subscribe, and hit the notification bell so you never miss a shocking real-life story like this. Your feedback means a lot to us.